All right. Huh. Well, good afternoon. This is returning back with At the Fireplace with Bertron Hamill's program. In this case, In the Woods with Bertron Hamill. So featuring my fiance Erin Roach, fellow Mississippi author, and we this time we have a book we want to introduce to you. I may have introduced or at least mentioned it in one of my videos before, but anyway, in this case, I want to show you what we have here that we released back in June. We have a collaborative work called The Sea Tales of Felae, Descent. So this is the debut of what we hope to be a series that talks about all kinds of sorts of tales to be had, quite broadly, we hope, as we go. So maybe, hopefully, like an episodic series that kind of feels non-ending, so to speak. But it basically covers the concerns of setting where you have this sea of universal scale. So it's this vast sea of Felae, as it's called. And this is my fiance, Erin Roach. We met last time with our last video we did with when we presented Dahlia and my work with the Reckoning of a Loot. So I know with this Reckoning of a Loot being Reckoning of a Loot channel, I normally talk about it at some point in the video, but at some point, hopefully you're already connected with the channel at this point, so you can go back and look at those and you can learn more about the Reckoning of a Loot as you wish. In this case, we're just going to strictly talk about this work. Now, this work, just so you know, we have just learned this week that we have been recommended, keyword recommended, for the Pulitzer Prize. So we're not nominated right now or anything like that. We've had some readers who really enjoyed our work and they felt that strongly about it that they want to recommend it.
Very excited
so,
and very blessed.
Any comment you'd like to add?
Oh, I'm just excited.
Okay.
Just to be recommended is something amazing. This book has been so much fun to write together. Until he and I met, I'd never written a book collaboratively with anybody, so this is amazing.
So we really had a lot of fun coming with this one. I'll let Erin read the blurb.
Okay. Supercontinental worlds are interconnected by the grand Sea of Felae. Before discovering the mysteries of Felae's lore and vast nature, a young man is beguiled by his own folly to follow feigned beauty and voided promises into the darkness of the depth. Will he survive the mysteries of the deep, and will he find grace to return to the surface of men? And will the siren who set him on this path find redemption? Find out in this first installment of the Tales from the Sea of Felae.
So as the blurb kind of indicates, we do kind of hope to play along with some elements of well-known mythologies throughout our work. So like may have elves, dwarves, even leprechauns. Even in this case, we even see sirens, selkies, and things like that. So we really have a lot of fun, just kind of expanding, just having fun with it. And so it's been a very big playground for us, and we're really enjoying it. So Erin's going to start reading from the book, and she's going to read from chapter 3. I'll let her take off.
All right, chapter 3. The title is Treachery's Dissension, Siren's Redemption. And I'm going to start on this part concerning the siren. Her name is Walea. Meanwhile, on the shore above, the true Walea had dragged herself away from the water's edge. The tide was coming in, and she had not the strength to fight the water that would surely drown her. Hot tears were on her face, and she would let out a deathly cry whenever she felt her strength rise enough. Clawing at the sand, she felt skin scrape from her arms, legs, and feet as she pulled herself across the shale. She was not the only thing that had changed. The beautiful cove she'd been placed in to lure mortals was beautiful no longer. Where white shells had been, there was now gray shale, covered with the carcasses of rotting fish. Her tent was nothing but a torn ship's canvas, too tattered to even keep the wind off of her. "What a fool I was," she sobbed. "I traded so much for endless youth, but it was all a lie." Looking at her bloody, gnarled hands, she cried harder. "Now I have sent that poor boy to his death, and doomed a world I was never wise enough to appreciate." Looking upward, she said in a quieter voice, "If Galore would only give me another chance, I would make this right if I could." Dropping her face into the sand, Walea steeled herself for the death she knew was fast approaching her. After hours of lying there, she felt a soft touch on her shoulder. She had no strength to raise her head, could not see who had approached her until a pair of strong but gentle hands rolled her onto her back. Opening her eyes, she saw the face of a man above her. He wasn't old, but then again, he wasn't young. The dark hair and beard indicated early years, but his eyes held a look of wisdom that only the old should have. His face was deeply lined, and several scars crisscrossed his forehead. "I know you?" Walea posed the statement as a question due to her own confusion, hoping that the man would clear her memory. He smiled a warm smile, full of love and mercy. "You called for me, and I came, just as I would have so long ago." Walea's eyes widened, her voice shook as she stammered out her next word. "Galore?" The man smiled even more, and a light laugh escaped his lips. "I and he are one, yet separate. I am Lamphey." He watched for any trace of recognition in her eyes, but none came. "Ah, you were one of those who were never introduced to me." A look of deepest sadness crept into his eyes, a sadness so deep that it seemed to cause physical pain. Walea felt her tears falling in new torrents down her face, and she closed her eyes tightly in an attempt to block out his pain. Hers suddenly seemed insignificant and deserved. "I am sorry," she moaned, a sob choking her words off. His hands firmly gripped her shoulders again, and he gently helped her into a sitting position. She gripped his upper arms with what little strength she had left. If he let her go, she knew she would die. "I won't let go," he said in a low voice, as if reading the fearful thoughts that pounded through her head. "You called out for help, and for a truly repentant heart I came." Walea's lips quivered, and she shook her head weakly. "I don't deserve your help, but please help the boy I've doomed to a fate far worse than mine." Lamphey nodded with understanding. "I understand what you are asking, but it is through you that Farinoi will be snatched from Sadefield's clutches." Seeing the disbelief in her eyes, Lamphey's face became a shade sterner. "If you will not help him, then he is lost. You will pass on from this world forgiven and redeemed, but without completing the task I have set before you." His eyes bore into hers, full of deep love and mercy. "The choice is yours, Walea." "How can I, Lord?" she asked, her voice slightly stronger. "I have lived centuries off the strength of fallen beings." A catch in her voice caused her to pause for breath before continuing. "I have no strength of my own left to follow him." "I am not asking you to do this on your own strength," Lamphey replied. "I am asking you to rely on mine to sustain you." Walea's face contorted in pain and disgust. "I have survived off the strength and life of others for so long." "Walea," Lamphey's voice was stern. "I am not like the sires you sacrificed the man who loved you to." She cringed and tried to shrink away from the memories Lamphey's words brought flooding back to her. "I am not the ruler of the sires who promised you an eternal throne with him, and then rejected you when you approached the time of turning to foam on the ocean waves." Each word sounded like the deep peal of a bell sounding through her brain and penetrating deep into her soul. It felt as though the hardened darkness that had clung to her for so long was being violently cracked and chopped away. "And I am not," Lamphey's voice pealed like thunder, "Sadefield, who deceived you beyond what his servants ever did. He promised you eternal youth, beauty, and the ability to feel constantly valued in your seduction of the foolish men of the mortal race." His voice was tinged with both anger and anguish. "I will never lie to you. I will never betray you. Yes, you will grow old on this earth and eventually die. But Walea," his voice immediately softened and became like the tender voice of a father, "when you leave this Felae, all the evil, the sadness, and the pain, it will all be gone. You will live forever with me. I want you to be with me, not lost within the tormenting abyss of darkness that waits for those who follow Sadefield." Walea felt something lifting from her, the weight of guilt, anxiety, fear. It was all slowly draining from her. As she heard the precious words from Lamphey's lips and saw the unshakable love in his eyes for her, she knew what she had to do. "Show me how, my lord, and I will go." I love that part in the book.
Love you.
Love you too.
So, chapter 4, I was going to read it for you. And it picks up right where she left off, where it reads entitled Foul Mysteries of the Deep. So here we get to see our character, Faranoy, the young man that Leia misled into the descent of the depths of this sea. You get to see a little bit of his exploration as you would with all that.
Well, hi. First of all, I want to apologize for the interruption of the feed. The mic I was using for our recording interrupted, where the audio was no longer recording for us. I expect that was a battery issue. I probably just need to recharge it. I need to get a little more experience with it. It's a newer mic, first time trying it out. So I apologize for the technical difficulty there. I did want to take this opportunity to go ahead and pick up the book and continue, or rather, continue the video and be able to finish my part in the reading. So with that, without further ado, as they say, I'll pick up and read chapter 4, Foul Mysteries of the Deep. During this time, Faranoy had sunk down into a dark oblivion. He had been terrified enough when his fall began, but this only increased when the plant life began to grasp at him. He felt tentacle-like leaves wrap around his torso to begin with. With a cry, he began tearing it off of him. Due to his own screams, he couldn't be sure, but he thought he heard shrill cries when he tore at the plants. Some seemed to reach out and take hold of his ankle, but these were further down, and he was certain they were pulling him further from the light. Kicking violently, Faranoy struggled to free himself, but only felt that he was becoming further entangled within the demon plants. With no warning, all of the plants suddenly pulled away, letting the exhausted young man sink onto a solid surface. He lay there, panting, hearing his heart pounding in his ears. Reaching up, he clutched his chest, trying to ease the pains that kept shooting through it. As he calmed down, he was able to focus more on his surroundings. Above him was a faint ray of light cutting through the murky water. This shed a dim gray hue over the area he lay in. The surface was as smooth as a pearl, at least for the most part. A little way from where he lay, a hideous cluster of bumps broke the otherwise flawless area. As his eyes adjusted, he saw that this was not the only area that was affected in this way. In fact, there were at least half a dozen places that he could see in the limited lighting. Standing to his feet, he waited for the trembling in his legs to subside before he tried walking. Once steadied, he cautiously approached the cluster of bumps. They were larger than he'd realized, reaching to his knees and some taller. Protruding from each of them was a quill-like hair, stiff, completely straight, and with a razor-sharp point on the end of them. He stared at it for a moment, and then, with a sudden, morbid desire to feel it, he extended his hand. His fingers barely brushed the quill when it retracted itself with great speed into the bump. Faranoy recoiled. He had a sudden eerie feeling that the surface he stood on might not be lifeless. Kneeling, he placed his hand on the smooth area and held his breath. In the stillness, he could feel the slightest rise and fall of steady breathing beneath his hand. The surface he was on wasn't the glorious floor of Cetice, but the back of some sea creature that was larger than anything he'd ever imagined. Slowly rising to his feet, he glanced around, trying to determine how to escape without the creature being roused. There was no way to determine what direction would take him away from the creature's mouth or anything which could be used to capture Faranoy. Looking up, Faranoy could still see the light of the sun from above. This gave him an idea. Crouching, he took a deep breath and then jumped, propelling himself upwards towards the surface. However, he hadn't gone very far when the plants that had so terrorized him earlier blocked his way. Losing his upward momentum, Faranoy tried to evade grasping foliage. In so doing, he inadvertently propelled himself in a downward angle instead of a level one. The result of this was a rather hard landing on the creature below. Faranoy struggled to gain his bearings, but a heaving beneath his feet prevented this. The creature was fully aware of Faranoy's presence now. A shrill screech echoed through the water and vibrated along the creature's skin. With a sudden surge, the creature arched its body, and Farinoi began tumbling uncontrollably. He collided with the bumps as he rolled, narrowly missing being skewered by the quills that no longer retracted themselves. The creature began swimming through the water, and Farinoi was flung into a watery, empty space. He began flailing in a panic and managed to prevent himself from sinking once more. Turning in circles, he tried to determine where the creature was and if it was going to attack him. During one such turn, he suddenly found himself looking into an opaque pupil, surrounded by a bright yellow iris that looked as if it was lit from within. This was only a brief look, not even long enough for Farinoi to let out the scream he felt rising within him. Like a fleeting shadow when the wind stirs a tree, it was gone. He turned in a circle once more, but saw no sign of the creature. Nothing but the shadowy gray water surrounded him. Farinoi looked upwards and could still see the sun shining dimly through the surface of the water. It was only broken by the dark outline of the staircase he'd fallen from, and a few tendrils of plants that waved in motion with the currents. Perhaps Cetice wasn't the glorious place I believed it to be. This thought was the first wise one he'd had concerning this ocean world, but it was as fleeting as a wave on the shore. No, I simply left the path that would lead me to the beautiful part of Cetice. I simply must find the way back to it. These thoughts succeeded in calming his waving arms, and he gently sank onto the ocean floor below. Without the creature there, Farinoi found himself standing upon a rocky terrain. The plants grew from the clusters of these rocks. Their stalks were all that were visible down this low, and apparently beyond the leaves they were harmless. This was Farinoi's assumption, since he suffered no attack as he began wandering through them. All the while he walked, he looked upwards, trying in vain to follow the path of the staircase. However, there were many deep, black canyons and crevices that the staircase was built over. These Farinoi could not cross in the same line as the stairs, so he had to find other paths that would allow him safe passage over these dark abysses. One such path was nothing but a mere strip of rock, barely the width of a ship's main mast pole. Farinoi stared at the path he knew he had to follow, but he dreaded the very thought of trusting himself to something so narrow. His memory of the current which carried him off the staircase rushed vividly into his mind. Nevertheless, thoughts of Walea and the world they were to travel together overpowered his fear, and he tentatively took his first step over the gorge. He refused to look down at first. There was an unearthly feeling about being high above. He knew what. Blackness on each side and the one strip of dull gray rock to show him the way to go. It was almost like being on the top of a mountain and knowing that the next step was probably the last you would ever take. Once that step was gone, it was a rapid but terrifying drop into eternity as your body smashed against the rocks. However, this was different. One false step, and it was an undetermined distance that he would fall. There was no knowing what rocks or sunken ships his body would be bashed against, and the fall would be slow and more terrifying as he awaited the next blow to his body. Also, there was a possibility of encountering a creature that wasn't as willing to leave him alone. Farinoi froze at this thought. Despite being underwater, his mouth went dry, and he felt a shaking in his knees, and that rapidly spread until both of his legs were vibrating and he was having difficulty keeping his balance. The next few steps he took were shaky, and he swayed precariously from side to side. Not believing his situation could get any worse, he forced himself onward. However, a break in the stone almost destroyed his determination altogether. About 2 feet of the narrow ledge he walked was gone. Only a black gap remained and separated him from the short distance he would have to cross to reach solid ground on the other side. There was no turning back now. The space he was on was too narrow, and his strength and steadiness was almost fully depleted. For the first time since he'd stepped onto this path, Farinoi looked downwards. The blackness was so thick that it looked like a solid floor beneath him rather than a yawning pit. Surprisingly, this calmed him somewhat. If he could just picture it as a dark floor, then he would have less anxiety about trying to cross the gap. Breathing deeply, he kept staring into the darkness. Reaching up, he wiped his face, though no sweat lay on his brow to cause him to do so. As he did this, a piece of his shirt, which had been torn during his struggle to reach Walea's cove, fell away. It drifted in the water for a moment, and then suddenly was sucked downwards. Faranoy's hand froze on his forehead, and he found himself unable to look away as the darkness below him was suddenly broken by two blue slits. The bright blue grew, and the young man soon found himself looking into the large, slanted eyes of something beneath him. The water began to churn around him, and though he couldn't see anything, he could sense that there was movement directly beneath where he stood. Up from between the eyes, something lighter emerged, snaking its way upwards. In horror, Faranoy watched a rounded tongue feel its way over the edge of the path. It was cylindrical, with the end resembling the bottom of a cut diamond. A sickly green color with black splotches scattered sporadically on the surface, it approached Faranoy with movements that were almost hypnotic. Unable to move, Faranoy felt a rising terror at the fate that was about to overtake him. He watched as the tongue inched its way towards his feet. A morbid, horrifying fascination had taken hold, and though terrified, he was curious as to what would happen once he was taken. The tongue encircled his feet loosely, not even touching them. Then he saw it tense and knew that it was about to seize him. "Oh, Galore," Faranoy screamed in his mind, unable to utter a sound. All of a sudden, a tremendous shriek cut through the water. It wasn't one of fright or of pain, but rather sounded like a desperate, angry scream. This sound had an unexpected effect on the creature below. Its tongue was immediately withdrawn, and the sides of the gorge Faranoy stood over began to fall away to the left of him. It immediately withdrawn, and the sides of the gorge Faranoy stood over began to fall away to the left of him. It looked as though the creature was burrowing through the ocean floor, fleeing from whatever that had made that cry. As for Faranoy, he immediately dropped and encircled the stone projection with his arms and legs. The creature was retreating, but he didn't know what might appear that was more terrible than what he had just seen. Gradually, the noise from the creature faded away, and the young man was left alone. The water seemed unnaturally still to him, and he tentatively looked down into the gorge. Surprisingly, it didn't seem so dark now, most likely due to the absence of the creature. And I'll stop there. That doesn't complete the chapter, but it does complete enough excerpt to where you're able to see some of the explorations that were made in the depths of the Great Sea of Felae. So as we see, instead of sea, this kind of works out as this sort of underworld that's to be had beneath the sea. And Faranoy is exploring and getting to see some of it. And as he continues to descend the depths. So, a lot of interesting things to be had. Hope you found it interesting. And a follow-up with Erin's reading as well. Hopefully you found that the two journeys of both these characters are going to be an interesting enough read for you. Hope you enjoy. Look it up. It's been recommended for the Pulitzer. And Sea Tales of Felae Descent, available on Amazon. Check it out. All right.